Laughter fills the room as a woman indulges herself in pleasures. A man covered in a hood looks at her in disdain. She glances at him with her piercing eyes. She exclaims, how dare he enter her bedchambers? She is the Empress of Ranchia Empire. Julia Domina Bereus. The hooded man is the captain of the Empress's personal guards, Justo Marcus. She notices his eyes filled with resolve. She pushes away her toys, stating she doesn't believe he's here to join the fun. She asks if he has come to commit treason. At that moment a group of hooded men are approaching. She smirks and begins to laugh loudly. The boys run away, sensing the escalating situation. She asks what he's doing there. He grits his teeth. He states she's gone too far. She gets off the bed and grabs a butter knife and calls him an ungrateful fool. She points the butter knife at him, exclaiming how dare he tries to bite the hand that feeds him. 7 days prior the Empress had ordered a mass execution. And it was on that day that Justo decided to sever all emotional ties to her. But that day what he severed was not just his loyalty to the Empress. Justo approached her with his hands tightly gripped around his sword. The Empress he trusted and followed was not always so disgraceful. She used to be noble and strong. She used to be a magnificent person who trusted him with her life. But time changes many things. She was no longer noble or great. Only disgraceful. He has now seen the truth. Justo could not sit back and watch any longer. The butter knife on the sword clashed. Surprisingly, the butter knife is holding its own. He is shocked that the butter knife has not shattered. She smirks knowingly. With a huge strike he is pushed back. A soldier rushed towards her. She finished him off in one strike. She then fixes her gaze on the others. The sound of clashing swords could be heard long into the night. Julia mercilessly massacre her guards one by one. However, Justo rushed towards her. She slashed at him. He dodges on his face as barely cut. Suddenly Justo saw an opening and pierced Julia with his sword. She coughed blood and her body was trembling. She tried to get closer to him. He grits his teeth and stabs her again. She shouts in pain. She then grabbed his robe, with blood staining her white robe and blood dripping from her red lips. She calls him a despicable traitor and states she will tear him to pieces. On torment him from the grave, Julia felt she had been wronged and cursed Justo until she drew her last breath. After her passing, her eyes were open. The sight of her murky eyes pierced Justo's heart. So he closed her eyes. He wished that she would rest in peace. This took place on the imperial calendar of September 14, 270. With that, Julia Domina Bereus, the sovereign of the continent and the mighty conqueror, met her bloody fate. A young brunette is drinking wine and reading her favorite parts of a book. Her name is Dansonga. She's 32 years old and reading online novels after work is what she looks forward to every day. Her boss yelled at her again today, so as always she is reading a book over wine to relieve the stressful day she had at work. The book, which she's been reading 3 times already, is a story about Empress Julia and her captain of the guards, Justo, who loved her. Empress of the Ranchia Empire, Julia Domina Bereus. She was an incredible, powerful empress. She used her strength to unite the continent, a feat never before accomplished by her predecessors. However, it is theorized that the endless wars drove her mad. When Julia loses control over herself and becomes a tyrant, her closest allied and captain of the guards decided to commit treason. Her favorite scene is where Julia is taken down by Justo's sword. She believes that incompetent and corrupt people deserve to meet your demise. She thinks about the day she's had because of Mr. Lee. She gets angry. The reason why she likes this scene the most is because of Mr. Lee. He's a terrible boss who is incompetent and always nitpicking. She thinks about following Justo and quitting, but she can't because of her monthly paycheck. She feels trapped. She decides to ignore it and drink her worries away, and go to bed. Suddenly she wakes up with a hangover and a burning sensation in her throat. She tries to get some water, then notices she's in a different place. A thought comes to her mind and she rushes towards the mirror. In the mirror she sees her glistening bright skin, marvelous blonde hair and lips as red as blood. She realized she's in the body of Yulia, the evil empress of Ranchia. She looks at her new body and wonders if she's dreaming. She pinches herself and finally realizes it's reality. She noticed a bell that Yulia used to call her maids. She calls them and a nervous maid with green hair enters. She immediately asked the current day. The maid tells her the day is September 11th. 270, she is stunned. That means there is only 3 days remaining until Husto coup d'état. She tries to remember why Husto wanted to get rid of her and what Yulia did up to the day of her demise. Yulia was once an ideal ruler, and as years went by more people swore their allegiance to her. However, as the war continued, Yulia began to drift away from her ideas for some reason. Drunk in carnage, she flaunted her power, conquered nations and treated her people with contempt. When the wars were finally over, Yulia was nothing but a corrupt tyrant who drank day in and day out. Then one day Duke Pice informed her that some traitors wanted the throne from her. She believed him and asked who wished to covet her throne. A group of subjects who used to swear allegiance to her but who are no longer loyal, stated the Duke. He tells her they are locked up in the Tower of Exile according to her command. She asked what shall they do. He grins. He stated even though they committed serious crimes because she value their lives. They were only temporarily exiled, however, since they planned to commit treason. He suggests that they should be executed and she did as he wished. That was September 7, 270. Yulia gave out an execution order that basically called for a massacre. The next day, Husto attempts to persuade her to rescind the execution order. Although her eyes no longer sparkle, Husto's really pleaded with her. Because he wanted to believe there was some good left in her. However, she smirked and said he always bored her with his talk. She told him to stop being dull and suggested he have a drink with her. And if he doesn't want to, he should leave. Husto was devastated as he watched her laugh. He realized the empress he served no longer existed. At that moment he clenched his fist and decided to overthrow her. The new host had felt really bad for Husto, but if she can figure out a way to stop him, she'll be safe. To do that, she'll need to stop the execution, but she can't just call it off without a good reason. Because when Husto sets his mind to something, he means it. The reason he tried to believe that there was good left in Yulia was because he loved her, even though he never dared to express his feelings. Even after he had decided to commit treason, he felt conflicted. As a servant and as a man, in order to put his feelings of love behind him, he swung his sword for 3 days straight. Until his hand was covered in blood. Even though Yulia started losing her mind after the war, it was because of him that the coup d'état took so long to take place. In order to save herself and stop the execution, she needs a good enough reason for Husto to forgive Yulia. Since she remembered almost everything that was written in the novel, all she has to recall is what she has read. She remembers the words of Duke Pice. She remembers that those whose lives were spared thanks to Husto coup brought the Duke of Pei's corruption to light and rebuilt the Ranchia Empire. She then decides to use the Duke of Pice's corruption as a reason to stop the execution. She'll tell everyone that she ordered the mass execution in order to bring his corruption to light. The Dukes of Pice knew his life would not be spared if Yulia found out about his wrongdoings. She then calls for her maid. She knows the one that has evidence are most likely the ones in the tower. She tells the maid she has business to attend there. At that time, members of the coup d'état are forcing their leader to make a decision. All the other orders of knights have finished making preparations. He tells them to strike in 3 days' time. They plan to execute the corrupt empress and the Duke of Pice and rebuild the empire. The men are very happy that he's finally made a decision. The empress may be powerful, but if they put their strengths together they can win. Executing the empress will not solve everything. They must execute all the deprived nobles, including the Duke of Pise, and reinstate all those framed and imprisoned in the Tower of Exile. The most difficult thing he must do is get rid of the empress with his own hands. Suddenly a soldier rushes to inform him that Her Majesty is on her way to the Tower of Exile. They are all shocked, Felix the Great Magician and Prime Minister Benuche. In order to stop her impending demise, she will need them. The tower was a confusing place with many seasons mixed together. It would be sunny and clear skies one day, then bitter cold the next. At times it would be autumn in one half of the tower and summer in the other half. The Tower of Exile used to be the magician's tower a long time ago. Many climates were mixed due to a large-scale magic experiment. As a result, the temperature became so harsh that the prisoners inside had trouble staying alive until their execution day. Which is why Duke Pise tried to frame anyone who was wise and competent or close to the Empress, lock them away in the Tower of Exile. Yulia had lost all her judgment. She had believed the fabricated reports put together by the Duke of Pise. She not only banished a group of her followers from the palace, but also ended up ordering a mass execution. As a saying goes, he that commits a fault thinks everyone speaks of it. He knew if Yulia found out about his corruption, he would not survive. Carrie, the Duke of Pise, originally was in charge of overlooking domestic affairs in the Empress' stead. When she was off fighting in the front lines, after the series of wars ended, he encouraged Yulia's indulgences by providing her with alcohol. An unknown substance, he satisfied his own selfish interest by forging documents. He used the Empress's power as if it was his own. The guards welcome her to the Tower of Exile. She ordered them to take her to the prisoners. The outside of the tower was cool, but the fourth floor was warm. She noticed that Felix was using magic just like he did in the novel. Yulia's original order was to banish them. However, Duke Pise took it upon himself to imprison them in the tower. They are all shocked to see her. She asked why are they all there. She had ordered them to be banished, not to be executed. Felix, seeing Yulia, is filled with joy and hope. The servant Felix was a boy destined to become a great magician in the near future. When he was young, he was prosecuted by the villagers for his magical power. Then the boy met Yulia while she was fighting a war, and was able to leave the village. Felix wanted to follow her. He told her he can use magic, and if she took him with her he would swear his allegiance to her. Impressed by the boy's resilience, she told him he could never harm her and he would not have to make such a promise. However, she allowed him to be her servant. Felix smiled joyfully. This was his new hope. Yulia was the first person who acknowledged him, even after the Empress passed away. Felix could not hate her. To him, Yulia was the person who had gave him a new life. He insisted that there must have been a different reason why she became a tyrant. She tells Felix she's aware he's using magic. He responds. He's aware that he's not supposed to use magic since he's become a criminal. However, he couldn't just sit and watch the others suffer. So he tried to warm up the floor. She informs him she has not come there to punish him, but instead take responsibility because her command was not properly carried out. It sounds ridiculous, but she says it would great confidence. Therefore she decided to set them free, if they do not wish to stay by her side. She will not punish them if they wish to leave. She swears it on her name. She knows that demanding their answers at that moment would be like forcing them to stay. It's a gamble. As she leaves, she tells them if they were to stay by her side they should return to the palace by tomorrow morning. She's emotionally exhausted, hoping that Felix comes tomorrow. But the next person will be an even bigger problem. She walks up cold and snow-filled stairs. The higher she climbs, the lower the temperature drops, but she walks up firmly. But the others are trembling from the cold. She tells them to wait, she will speak to Lord Benyush privately. They whisper to one another about what they think she's up to. The door is frozen with ice. However, she opened it easily. A burst of freezing cold air hit her face. She remembered that Lord Benos never once lost his composure even as he awaited his execution. He stood tall and prepared to meet his fate. When he saw her, he asked why she came to see him. She tells him she has come to give him an order. He looks at his book uninterested, stating to a criminal. She boldly states she wants him to denounce the Duke of Pice. He's taken aback. He's about to ask a question. Suddenly a loud slamming sound interrupts. Catching their attentions in the process, she wondered what's happening. This never happened in the novel, although they have never met in real life. She recognized him immediately. His hair has dark as night. His green eyes that seem to symbolize his integrity. His hard train body that could not be hidden underneath his clothes, and his handsome face that stood out next to the empress's. She quickly puts on her facade of being Yulia. He nervously tells her he was concerned that she had left the palace without proper escort. She smiles, knowing that's obviously a lie. Yulia doesn't need protection. He's not concerned for Yulia. He's concerned about Benyush. He's worried Yulia might finish him off before his execution day. She believes sharing her plans with Husto would only raise suspicion. In order to stop his coup d'état, she needs to show him results, not just the process. She exclaims, "How dare he!" She tells him she doesn't remember inviting him there. He states he's responsible for her safety. She smirks, saying her safety. She tells him to leave. Feels like she has taken away his soul. He tells her there are many days left until the day of execution. In other words, he's saying he can't trust Yulia. However, the Yulia he has decided to get rid of has already gone. She responds if he had come all the way there just to tell her that. They stare intensely into each other's eyes. Benyush interrupts and says this sort of behavior is unacceptable. He asks if he thinks he's the only person privileged to privately meet with Her Majesty. Husto's face becomes red as he listens to what he's saying. He exclaims Her Majesty would have brought her sword if she planned and finishing him off. His eyes open wide as he realized that he's right. Yulia is surprised as well, as she had forgotten to bring the sword that Yulia always brings with her. Since enemies are everywhere, she tells him to leave. A vein appears on his face. He bows and takes his leave. But Yulia can feel him standing behind the door. Benyush asked if she's suspicious of Duke Marcus. She said she's not there to talk about him. He asked if she's aware of his treacherous heart. She's very happy that Yulia can keep a poker face, because she almost showed how flustered she was. She smirks on, states if he's curious whether she's reveling in debauchery because she's gone mad or she has other plans. She has garnered his attention. A slight smile appears on his face and he states he will denounce the Duke of Pice. At the end of the day, she falls on her bed exhausted. She thinks about Lord Benyush, who is a foreigner yet. He stood up against other nobles in the thick of a fight. He was also the first to put together evidence to denounce the Duke of Pice. Which needs more than just guts to do. The Duke of Pice will so much power that he even planted men around the Empress to keep an eye on her. Since Benyush stood up against them, she chose him to be the one to turn the predicament around. But their conversation was intense. He found what she was saying hardly convincing. Because it seemed like a very inefficient plan, she tells him up to that day she pretended to be a tyrant in order to gather evidence against the Duke. But Lord Benyush is not ready to believe her just yet. Which is not a surprise considering all the awful things Yulia has done. Duke Benyush wonders if she's being impulsive or if she really plans to bring down the Duke of Pice. He tells her it's better he awaits his execution, since that is an inevitable rite of passage. And since his life hangs on her whim, Yulia is shocked. She thought he would say something like he will follow her order, since she spared his life, but what he actually means is if she spares his life now, he knows she'll get rid of him anytime she feels like. She thinks it would be better that way since allegiance would have been a heavy burden on her shoulders. However, as long as their goal is the same, he will use her and she will use him. Meaning she shouldn't expect him to swear allegiance to her. But she isn't worried since in the novel after Yulia's passing Lord Benyush spent all his energy on time rebuilding the empire. The next day she is awoken by careful footsteps. She hopes it includes some of the people she said free from the Tower of Exile. She rings the bell. A maid arrives greeting her with a gentle smile. There was kindness in her voice unlike the maid from yesterday. The reasons that these servants must have returned is because they have faith in Yulia. However, she can still sense their fear. She's grateful that they came back. However, he's not there. She's searched frantically for him. But Felix isn't there in her bedroom.